because I think when you look at how coaching has always been, is you win at a job like Colorado, you win at a job like Indiana, you win at a job like Washington, and then you graduate to a bigger job. For many years it was the NFL. Now it's bigger colleges, and I have a feeling we're not going to see that as much. And Deion Sanders is in this boat. Curt Cignetti is in this boat because I think those are two names where you look at, oh well, they're crushing it at Colorado and Indiana. They're just going to get poached the next season. Not so fast. I don't think that's necessarily true. Curt Cignetti specifically, I think he's working on a formula where you go to a school, you build the roster, and then you take that roster with you. And Deion Sanders kind of did the same thing with Shadur and Travis Hunter at Jackson State, then brought his favorite guys over, and then rebuilt the rest over the course of the next few seasons. So I think that's one thing. Is I don't think Curt Cignetti's going anywhere, despite my Twitter. Also, I have a bit on Twitter where I just randomly tweet out coaches and jobs. So if Curt Cignetti gets hired by Florida next year, I'll be like, oh, I called it. But meanwhile, there's 18 different Curt Cignetti to school tweets. So I'm working on that.
Yep.
We're working on that. Just throwing darts at a dartboard. But so I think that's the formula for a guy like Curt Cignetti. And then you also just look at jobs like Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly. Like they left established, rosters and established programs to try to get to that like A+ tier. And I think we might see this with Kalen DeBoer as well at Alabama, even though that's a different beast. That's not working out very well. LSU lost to Florida. USC, they might not make a bowl game. They probably will, but 6-6 is probably the ceiling for that team. When they were CFP contenders year in, year out with what they had built beforehand. And they were even able to take players with them. Of course, Lincoln Riley took Caleb Williams. But I think that we might see a trend in coaches just sticking around where they're at now and making hay while the sun's out.
If schools can find the money for them, I think I look at, and Curt Cignetti is a perfect example. Indiana is not a traditional football powerhouse, but shoot, I mean, he's aware that you can get away with maybe a couple of lackluster seasons sometimes with a fan base like that, just because they're not used to winning historically. That's what Matt Campbell's done at Iowa State. He's figured out that, hey, you can have one of the worst, they were finished dead last in the Big 12 a couple of years ago at 4-8. And he just got a pay raise the season before. And a lot of fans, a lot of fan bases would have said, well, we got to get, it's time for a new coach. That wasn't the situation here, Brandon. Like they let him figure his stuff out. They had a, nice year last year. Now this year, they're putting together another great year. And I think as long as schools can find the money, you can build a brand absolutely anywhere. You don't have to go to a premier school necessarily to build the brand that you're hoping for. Now, that granted, 17, 18-year-old kids, if they hear that Alabama wants them or Ohio State wants them or Texas wants them, yeah, it's still tough to say no because those are just historic brands. But a lot of student athletes like to pave their own way these days too, and they're willing to take those shots on coaches and coaching staffs that maybe have a vision that they also believe in.
Well, and I mean, you talk about Alabama and Texas there, but if you're also looping in USC and LSU in that conversation, you might look at an Indiana and be like, well, shoot, I might actually be more likely to play in a Big Ten championship at Indiana than USC. Or, I might actually be able to, the path to a college football playoff is slightly clearer in the Big 12 if I go play with Coach Sanders, as opposed to if I try to get on this LSU roster. Like it's this is where the gap starts to narrow down, where the 14 playoff I think expanded it quite a bit. 'Cause now it's really 4 teams that are able to make it in the postseason. As we saw through those 10 years, it's the same rotation of teams. Alabama, Clemson had a good rotation. Ohio State, Michigan towards the end, so on and so forth. But now, like Indiana could not make the Big Ten championship and have an opportunity to compete for national championship. Colorado is in a conference with a power vacuum, and they absolutely could be in shape to compete and be the next Texas and Oklahoma. and be college football playoff regulars and get to compete for national championships. So I think all in all, this is good news for the Big 12, because I think that would be kind of the stone that you would make as you talk about money. Big Ten and SEC is always going to have more money to pay these coaches. But if you're thinking from the sense of, how do I build my coaching legacy, maybe the Big 12 is the opportunity. Maybe Chris Kleiman is like, okay, well, I'm chilling here. I can make a college football playoff with this team, or I can win a conference championship with this team, even if I'm
Right.
sacrificing, $3 or $4 million a year every year. I think that's at the end of the day good news for the Big 12.
Yeah, and I think it's just job security means something. I mean, coaches don't like, a lot of coaches are used to job hopping their entire life. I remember Arkansas football coach Sam Pittman. Shoot, he started coaching in Missouri, and I think he's made stops at like 15 schools, 20 schools in his life, like somewhere in that range. That's a lot of moving. And I remember like when they took the Arkansas job, his wife pretty much said to him, "We're not moving again. This is your last job, whether it works or not," because moving takes a toll on
It's a
coaches,
grind.
families. It's a grind. And when you're at the assistant level, you kind of have to. But I think for a lot of coaches, you kind of hope eventually you get to a situation like, I want to be here forever. Like, I don't want to leave. I don't want to do anything else. So, I think if that's a dream, I think that's something that's super important for sure, Brandon. I think there's no question about that. So definitely good news in the Big 12. But again, money still speaks. But look, it's not the pressure of some of these programs is no joke. Florida State, Mike Norvell, that guy. I mean, he's gonna make a lot of money no matter what. But goodness, that must not be. It's not fun going into work every single day right now if you're Mike Norvell. But then again, a certain amount of money, you might just not care.
No kidding. All right, but I just want to get that off my chest because Deion's kind of in that envelope where, like, going into this experiment and going into this year specifically, I'm like, well, either it's going to fall apart and he's going to leave because he doesn't want to be associated with that failure. Shout out, look up the charter school that he tried to start in Texas, and you'll see how he reacts to adversity. Or it does work and he's just going to get poached by an SEC school. I'm much less convinced of that today than at the beginning of the year.